welcome back to Castle Goring, chatting with Lady C. Hello, Georgie, how are you today?
Leo, I have no idea how I am. Maybe you could
Well,
tell me. I've been so busy and so much has been
yes,
going on behind the scenes.
yes.
That
So interesting things today
yes.
happened. I mean, we will now talk about this, so it will be very interesting.
Well,
And yeah,
maybe we should say that we have some interesting questions that people have sent in that we
yes,
will address after this very topical matter of Harry and Meghan and their speech regarding the Commonwealth and the Jamaican High
the commission.
Commissioner's
Yes,
statement, because of course he's been all over the BBC and the newspapers. He's been asked to comment upon Harry and Meghan's intercourse with various representatives of the Queen's Commonwealth Trust.
yes,
So
yes.
it's a real hot potato that Harry and Meghan have yet again managed to pick up and barely touch and lob it into everybody's lap. Uh,
Yeah,
which,
there been the video of them talking on the conference call with some other people from Commonwealth Trust,
yes.
and they were saying that, I mean, the Megan exactly said, if you listen more better and think, she
Mm.
said to people, don't just stay on Instagram, go on the streets.
You think that's what you got from
I mean,
it?
yes, because she said, we need action. So what
Yes,
action can be? If she said
yes,
before
yes.
action, don't stay on Instagram
Mm.
or any other social media, so it's mean, do some action. So
Yes, yes. Well, I think Meghan's call to action
yes,
is problematic. But I have looked at it very carefully. I have spoken to various people behind the scenes, as you know.
yes,
Uh, and I know from Buckingham Palace, they were at great pains to point out that they have nothing whatsoever to do with Harry and Meghan, which is interesting. Uh, but I think looking at it very carefully, I think that Harry and Meghan are trying to make themselves very relevant. I think they are playing a very dangerous game. I think that Harry and Meghan's objective is to make themselves relevant in a subject of great relevance. He, of course, is the president of the Queen's Commonwealth Trust, and she is the vice president. The Queen is the patron. If you listen very carefully and know all of the participants and all of the stuff behind the scenes, Harry has tried to be very measured in this regard. Meghan, of course, has hijacked it with her call to activism, but putting that aside, he has tried to be relatively measured. Notwithstanding that fact, Harry has shown his basic ignorance of the subject because he doesn't even understand, and clearly now does Meghan, that there is a huge difference between the Commonwealth and the Empire. The Commonwealth is an association of former colonies or dominions who have all voluntarily got together in a loose association. It's completely voluntary. It is one of the Queen's great accomplishments. She has kept it together on many occasions, as I point out in my book, when it was threatening to be fractured by the fractious behaviour of various countries, such as South Africa over apartheid, Rhodesia, which then became Zimbabwe, etc., etc. And it's telling that all of the countries that either left or were booted out of the Commonwealth, when they righted their matters, rejoined the Commonwealth. So Harry is actually apologising and interfering really in matters that he are far more complex than he appreciates, because there are several of the Commonwealth nations who are not woke, who do not agree with some of the tenets that Harry and Meghan are furthering politically. And if they do not poke their noses out of business that is not theirs and that they do not understand the complexities of, they themselves are going to end up being a divisive force within the Commonwealth, which I don't think is what anybody wants. He has brought up a very controversial subject, and, saying that the British people have to right the wrongs of the Commonwealth is inflammatory, especially at a time like this. But if you look beyond that, he's saying that everybody has to address it very truthfully. So that means if you are addressing it truthfully, and I don't think that Meghan picked up on this, you have to consider all sides of the question. And I can tell you, as a Commonwealth citizen, that it is a very complex issue. Race relations, socio-economic relations in all of the Commonwealth countries have evolved way beyond what you would imagine as an outsider. Harry is an outsider. He's a British prince. Meghan is not only an outsider, she's a complete foreigner. Meghan is not a British citizen. Meghan is not a member of the British Commonwealth. Meghan knows nothing about the British Commonwealth. She's never lived in it. I know she thinks she's an expert on everything if she's been briefed for 5 minutes, but that is not the case. Harry and Meghan are 3-year-olds who can barely string together 4 sentences, who have entered the orators' debate and are setting themselves up as Petronius arbiters who are going to tell practiced professional orators what they should be saying and how they should be delivering it. It is very naive of them. I think it is not very helpful of them because, aside from anything else, there is the underlying suspicion in all quarters that they are hijacking race relations for not only their relevancy and their earning capacity, but also because they are, well, she has ambitions to enter politics. And it's okay, Mickey, come on up, come on, oops, come on, okay. Mickey's come to join the conversation. Yes. Yeah, Mickey's come to make her contribution at a very important point, yeah. Which is, and this is absolutely fundamental to the whole question of why Meghan has absolutely no place interfering in anything to do with politics and or the Commonwealth issues until she actually is sufficiently informed, and if she is capable, which I doubt that she's capable of taking a balanced view of things, because I don't think she's capable, actually. I've come to the conclusion that Meghan is so self-centered and so self-aggrandizing and so overconfident and so woke that history and the realities of history have no place in her thinking. I could be wrong, I could be doing her a grave injustice, but just going off what I have seen with her conduct recently, in fact, especially since they went to America, Meghan needs to understand that the Commonwealth experience was completely different from the American experience. Her knowledge of the American experience appears to be, of her comments and her postures, deeply flawed, very prejudicial, unhelpful to the general debate, actually very destructive towards enhanced harmonious race relations. I mean, when Meghan Markle speaks, you'd never actually believe that America, the large percentage of Americans, elected a black president not once but twice. So far more white people elected a black president than black people. So where does that sit with some of her more aggressive, all white people are terrible, except of course the ones she slept with, and we know she's never slept with a black man. So, but putting that aside, it's just, and she's led a purely white life. She's never associated, by her own admission and her black family's own admission, she had very little to do with them when she was growing up. She saw them occasionally. When she did, they were made very welcome and they were very fond of her. But Meghan, of her own admission, usually and in fact frequently, and according to her detractors purposely, often passed for white. So putting that aside, all of that aside, I'm at pains to make the point that if you study Meghan Markle's history, you see that she has a very little personal experience of colour prejudice in America. Such experience as she has, I was told by various sources, was largely fabricated. And it's all in my book. For instance, her supposed encounter with a roommate when in her first week at Northwestern University, but nobody can track down the roommate. But notwithstanding the fact that roommates are actually a matter of record, Meghan's roommate that was so prejudicial against her has never been able to be tracked down. One or two of the people to whom I spoke, who've known Meghan at school, at university, from before school and after university, while she was an adult, one or two in Canada as well, that much of what Meghan now says and remembers are actually false memories. And I certainly did try to find the identity of this terrible girl who said these awful things to Meghan in the first week that she was at university. Well, you couldn't find the person. You found who she was supposedly sharing a dorm with, but that wasn't the person to whom Meghan is referring. So it begs the question, are these real memories, or is Meghan, the actress, confusing the latest script and the latest role and the latest starring role and the latest production that she wishes to be a world star in with the reality of what really happened? But putting all of that aside, Meghan knows absolutely nothing about the Commonwealth experience, and it's largely, in terms of slavery, the West Indian experience. She knows nothing about it, and I can bet my bottom dollar that if she knew anything about it, she would run in the opposite direction, because it's not going to play out the way Meghan would like it to play out. Funnily enough, if she were less of an actress and less politically ambitious and less willing to jump on every bandwagon, she would discover that much of it would actually help anybody in a political career, because it goes towards terrible times, working through to more harmonious times with both good and bad. It's a very mixed bag. She doesn't know any of this. And take it from me, having written the book on her, if she alights upon it, apples will grow on a lilac tree first. Which leads me to the Jamaican High Commissioner's comments to the BBC that have been widely reported upon in the press regarding Meghan and Harry's intervention into the Commonwealth debate. And I agree with everything the Jamaican High Commissioner said. I know George Ramocan. He's a very, very bright, capable, educated, evolved man. He's not a professional diplomat. He was a businessman, and he was a senator. He was actually in the Senate with one of my cousins in Jamaica, one of my father's cousins. One of my mother's cousins was the minister of something, I don't remember what now, and he was also a senator in Michael Manley's government, in the Democratic Socialist government. So my own family has represented both political parties and both persuasions in Parliament and in the Senate in Jamaica. And I would venture to say, without being boastful, I am infinitely more knowledgeable about socio-economic and political and racial issues in Jamaica and the Commonwealth than either Harry or Meghan. I mean, her conduct, call to activism, don't be on Instagram, hit the streets, as you put it, is not helpful. In fact, it is the absolutely worst thing you can do. But what we do need is an open debate about the whole matter, because people, once they delve into the subject, they will discover that yes, there were wrongs, but there were rights. The British Commonwealth, the British Empire, did some good and some harm, and one needs to be mindful now of where the good was and where the harm was. And in a way, you're actually grooming the horse long after it's left the stable, long after it's left the first two fields, and now that it's grazing in the third and fourth field. Because most of the Commonwealth countries have been independent for about 50 years, if not over 50 years. So, it's time for a catch-up, so to speak. But people are going to discover when they catch up that it's a lot more layered, it's a lot more mixed, and there's right on every side and there's a wrong on every side too. They're going to discover it when they delve deeply. But, and nobody is going to be able to have the excuse, once they have knowledge, to tear down statues and to try to rewrite the past and to maraud through streets and go on shopping expeditions without the benefit of a wallet or a credit card.
Free shopping. and the social disorder and Yes.
anarchy that has been taking place on the back of Black Lives Matter. And yes, Black lives do matter, very much so. But the truth matters as well, and history matters, and respect for what happened matters. And we are actually, believe it or not, where knowledgeable people are concerned, and I'm not referring to the ignoramuses who are hijacking it for political or socio-economic reasons, because there are many of them who are hijacking it. But people who are more measured and more evolved and more knowledgeable are already entering a completely different room. But these people need to catch up, and they do need to catch up big time. And they need to understand that some of their premises are completely false, and where they're not false, they are usually so out of date that it is farcical. And where they have relevancy, it needs to be respected and abided by and not exaggerated. You know, slavery and the slave trade, we touched upon it the other day, and I'm not going to go into it in any great depth now. But when we open up the debate about slavery and the slave trade, it is going to come as a great surprise to the Meghan Markles and other ignoramuses of this world to discover that the King of Benin and the Nigerian chiefs, amongst others, sent representatives to the British Parliament to try to get them to prevent the abolition of slavery, because these black African kingdoms and chieftaincies had made so much money by capturing and selling black people into slavery in the Americas. They're going to discover, that's just one of the very uncomfortable facts they're going to discover. They're also going to discover that while they are tearing out their hair and saying how terrible the British Empire was and how awful Britain was, that Britain was the very first country in the civilized world to systematically abolish the slave trade and slavery. Long after Britain abolished it, and indeed long after the British politicians were arguing about the best ways of abolishing slavery, the Africans not only had slavery, but tried to get the British politicians to stop the abolition of slavery. These are very discomforting facts that show that the whole question was much more layered than would appear to be the case. When you enter into the debate about reparations, which needs to be addressed, but I can tell you right now, after the debate has taken place, it's going to be obvious that nobody's going to be able to give reparations to anybody else, because if they're trying to say that the British have, sorry?
Yeah, I mean, to whom will give reparation?
Well, aside from the fact that we're speaking about things that happened nearly 200 years ago, the fact of the matter is, are the Africans going to give reparations to the West Indians and to the North Americans and South Americans that they captured and sold into slavery? Are they gonna? Or, I mean, you see how complicated it becomes. Or is it going to be only that Europeans or the people of European descent in the West Indies and in the United States of America, are they the only ones who are supposed to have not partaken of slavery, but it was okay for Africans to take part in slavery? We are caught up at the moment in a hysterical, very disturbing, but somewhat necessary debate about some of the things, injustices, inequities, problems that happened in the past. But they did happen in the past. And we need to have respect for the past, and the only thing that sets you free is the truth. Knowledge sets you free, not lies, not people's, overprivileged middle class people in England and America flouting health and safety regulations in the time of an international pandemic, to protest and help themselves to goods in Dior and Gucci. I mean, really, I mean, and the reality is, no matter how loudly these people shout, those of us who know the truth and have any guts are going to have to shout just a little bit louder and say, no, you're an ignoramus. You don't know what you're talking about. Back off and learn the facts. Then, after you've learned the facts, let's see what you have to say.
Yes, and there was also an interesting article in Jamaican News.
Oh, the Jamaican Gleaner. Yes, the Jamaican Gleaner is one of the finest newspapers in the world. Always was, still is, I'm very proud to say. It used to be owned by people I knew. But it's a very conscious, very, very good writing, very reasoned debate. It's a wonderful newspaper and well known to be such all over the world. And they have recently rerun a piece that they ran in 2015 on slavery, on the part that the black countries and the black people played in slavery, as well as the white countries and the white people. Because Jamaica's national motto is out of many, one people. And Jamaicans take great pride in being at the forefront of all race relations and social issue debates. And to me, it was very encouraging to see that the Gleaner was sufficiently responsible as to understand that this hysteria is doing no one any good. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a debate. It doesn't mean that injustices that exist shouldn't be addressed. But it does mean that reality, responsibility, and the truth need to prevail.
Yes. So, do you think that, for example, now the High Commissioner of Jamaica was misled by this video of Harry and Meghan? Because there is two interesting facts in this. The first one is that even the Foreign Office and the members of Parliament gave the statements and saying that Harry, first of all, cannot be involved into politics, and this is wrong what he's doing, and there is no much of experience that he have. And the another thing, the second fact, is that the palace is not involved in this, so there is nothing to do officially with the royal family. And to say, because Harry is saying in front of whole nation or his family,
he's saying in front of the whole world. He's saying in front of the whole world. He's bringing up a very delicate subject that should be seriously addressed in responsible portals. It's not a debate that should be thrown into the mix so that Harry and Meghan can get column inches yet again. I mean, every few days they come up with some new antic to get column inches. And I mean, this is much too serious. And
so what the High Commissioner?
Well, I did speak to the High Commissioner, and I have a great deal of respect for the High Commissioner. And of course, the High Commissioner answered the comments that he was asked by the BBC in the context of the fact that Harry was speaking as the president and Meghan as the vice president of the Queen's Commonwealth Trust. Now, there is no... You cannot blame any High Commissioner or diplomat for accepting at face value the comments of somebody who is supposedly speaking on behalf of the Queen's Commonwealth Trust. But Having spoken to Buckingham Palace, and they could not have made it clearer to me that they had absolutely no input with this or be dragged into it. I mean, they practically said, I'm Pontius Pilate, sweetie pie, I wash my hands of the whole thing. That was the tone. And, Buckingham Palace is in a very difficult situation as well. The Queen is in a very difficult situation because, Harry is her beloved grandson. Meghan is her granddaughter-in-law. She wants to keep the door open for them. She wants to allow them to try to find their own way. Everybody's in a difficult situation except Harry and Meghan, whose situation seems to be, now what can I come up with today to get myself some more column inches? Oof. Gosh, I haven't been on the front pages of the newspapers for the last 20 minutes. What else am I going to come up with? It's one thing after the other.
Yes, and even the members of government said that Harry and Meghan stepped down of the royal family. So they said, look at your private life now. Don't get involved in the politics,
But this is the point. As you know.
But this is getting serious because if you have comments from Foreign Office and members of government saying this, well, previously they didn't.
But as you know, a few weeks ago, I had a former
senior member
of the royal household come down to me and practically beat me into submission to try to get me to warn Harry and Meghan that they cannot continue to be so highly political, that it is very dangerous. And I mean, okay, we can take the view that he chose to do it of his own accord, or we can take the view that he has concerns for the monarchy and he has concerns for Harry and Meghan. I mean, the reality is the royal family and everybody connected to them have concerns. They want Harry and Meghan to be a success. They don't want them to be the walking, talking, galloping disaster that they are shaping themselves up to be. I want them to be a success. I think actually if we could do a tonectomy on both of them and just maybe, tie their tongues back to the back of their throat or something,
Yes.
So that.
But is it true that Buckingham Palace tried to connect you to speak with them?
Sorry, I don't. Leo, stop asking. Stop. Still, honestly, you're being very mischievous.
Well,
being mischievous.
They may be told that you will be more persuasive.
You're being very mischievous. You're being very mischievous, and I'm going to really have to. And I think I'm going to send you to California.
I don't want to speak with them. They will send you to speak. I don't want to.
No. I want to send you to California.
Well, I want to.
You
go.
join
it's nice weather there.
You're being mischievous, and you can join the household of the two mischief makers.
Well, that somebody told me even last year that when Meghan was changing their people in their team, how she often changed the people. They were leaving and going. Somebody even told me, you should go to be her private secretary or something. I think I even asked you about this. What do you think? I think I sent you a message.
Well,
and so
I can think of a quicker way of committing suicide. Why don't you just jump off that parapet?
So yeah, I would like to go to California. It's nice weather.
Well, let's just hope that you don't end up looking as rattled as poor Harry looks.
No. Yeah, he looks a bit ill or something.
Well, everybody's been commenting on
very pale and strange.
Well, California is very sunny.
Yes.
So it can't definitely be lack of sunshine.
Sucks.
Well, maybe the naughty boy, but it could, poor Harry's beginning to look as if he's suffering from Stockholm syndrome, says I mischievously, because they're mischievous and I'm now going to be mischievous as well, because poor Harry doesn't really look like the Harry that everybody used to know.
Yes. Yeah, I was shocked when I saw this video. You remember my reaction was like, "What is he ill or something?"
Well, you're
It's
not
strange.
the only person.
Yeah, but
He's
many people
many
notice.
people have commented, but he
Yes.
also, I think, Harry he's had a personality implant. It's called a markledom. And shall we go on to something
Yes,
a little bit more agreeable?
Yes, more entertaining. So there were been few questions regarding of tearing down the statues. And Mickey,
It's okay. Come. It's
for a
okay.
visit.
Go on.
Yeah,
Continue
yeah.
asking.
So-
Come, baby girl. Come. Come around. Come on. Yes.
So there was a few questions regarding the tearing down the statues now.
I don't think that any statue should be torn down. In a revolution, they tear down statues.
Yes.
And that is understandable insofar as it goes. Although, of course, they have torn down some wonderful statues over the years. We are not living through a revolution. We are living through a pandemic that, through the irresponsibility of certain political activists, they have been stoking the fires. Also, we must not forget that this is an election year in America, and there are therefore all sorts of political reasons why what's happening in America is happening, which I don't want to get into because I'm not an American and I have friends and relations who support both political parties, so I see both sides of the question. But the fact of the matter is, it is the height of prejudicial behavior, it is the height of ignorance, it is the height of stupidity to try to rewrite your history and to demonize anachronistically people who were not demons, people who in their time did good within the parameters of their civilization. I am not in favor of tearing down any of the statues that want to be torn down. Cecil Rhodes, for instance.
There was Rose Scholars as well, yeah.
This was what I was coming to.
Oh.
Cecil Rhodes and his money, the money that he made, he has endowed Rhodes Scholars, including President Clinton, and several of the Rhodes Scholars who want his statue torn down. Well, you know, we don't know, but the endowment could require that Cecil Rhodes' money stop being used for the betterment of black, white, brown, yellow, red, you name it.
Yeah.
Any race, whatever race they are. And they all get the scholarship because they deserve it academically. Are they going to say, oh, we don't want to see Cecil Rhodes' statue because he lived in a different time and we don't like what he represents nowadays? And that's a very vocal minority that has that opinion, by the way. But we want to keep his money. I'm sorry, if the man is so beyond redemption that you can't clap eyes on him, why would you then be taking his money? It seems very morally unsound to say on the one hand, I'll take his money, but on the other hand, I don't want to
be associated with him.
Yes. Yeah. So that's where statues are concerned. And I mean, they're trying to tear down statues in America on the basis of the fact that some of the founding fathers owned slaves. I mean, of course they owned slaves. It was a slave society. You know, that's what's happened.
I mean, like Egyptians, Babylonians, I mean, all these ancient civilizations.
Every civilization, virtually, from the beginning of time until the late 19th century, when it became increasingly unpopular, was a slave-owning society. And the only continent where slavery flourished in the 20th century was in Africa. So I don't get how people who owned great Americans who owned slaves should have no statue to them, but great Africans who traded in slaves should have statues to them or should be treated with respect, but the others shouldn't. I'm sorry. We need to understand that people need to grow up.
Yes.
People need to grow up. This is a very childish debate. It's also damaging to the well-being of the Western world. It is extremely damaging that we are living in times where mob rule and violence are regarded as acceptable and should be allowed to prevail.
Yes.
I don't think mob rule and violence are desirable, and I don't think I, for one, am not prepared to be bullied. I was bullied through the whole of my schooling, and I learnt what it was like to be bullied and how to stand up to bullies in a way that I think very few other people who are looking at this video will ever know.
But there is also interesting fact that your grandmother's family was sent from Ireland because they were aristocrats during the Cromwell. They were sent to Jamaica as slaves.
Yes, Oliver Cromwell sent tens of thousands of royalists, Irish royalists, to the West Indies as slaves, including my grandmother's descendants. So technically, they were slaves for a very short period of time, but they were slaves. And so am I going to get reparations? Because I can tell you something, I'd really rather like to join the front of that queue, because we were there before many of the other people who want to claim. So if it's going to be done off time, I think I should be at the front of the queue with my hand out.
Yes.
So yeah, but I think it's constructive to have the debate, and yes. I think it's constructive to have the debate in a constructive manner and in a constructive environment. I do not think that a debate of this nature should be hijacked by attention-seeking simpletons or attention-seeking actresses who are simplistic and who fancy themselves as being experts on everything because they got briefing notes that are 5 pages long and really actually are so ignorant that it's beyond pathetic.
Yes.
You know, but I think there is room for a debate, but a debate where everybody understands the purpose of the debate is knowledge, redemption into an acceptance, and you move on into harmony. So the end goal is harmony. The end goal is not bucks, and it's certainly not mega bucks for Megs, because it seems to me that Meghan is very much in danger of positioning herself 2 and 3 times a week in such a way that she will end up being able to milk whatever is going on for her financial benefit and for her aggrandizement influentially. Yes. I'm sorry, Meghan needs to understand that public service doesn't mean pay me, and it doesn't mean, look at how wonderful I am. It means a degree of self-abnegation, and you're actually doing good for everybody else, not
Yes.
primarily for yourself. And I have to say, the more this whole situation evolves, is the more concerned I am as to the outcome with Harry and Meghan. And I know that people have said, who have read my book, some people have said, oh, you have been extraordinarily balanced. And several people actually said that it's so balanced and so well researched and so impartial that they see that it will stand the test of time and become a history book. Well, in fact, my Diana books are taught in schools.
Yes.
So it will be interesting to see if that does happen. But other people have also said that I have been too kind to Meghan, although one or two of them have noticed that my kindness does not stop me from speaking the truth. And they have actually, one or two people have actually commented on the fact that if that I actually end up killing them with kindness because I am so measured and I'm so kindly, but I don't let them off the hook anywhere at all, which is actually true. I don't see it ending well unless Harry and Meghan can be reined in. And I actually don't think she wants to be reined in or can be reined in. And I'm pretty sure that what Megs wants, Megs gets. You only need to look at him to see that he's now been so thoroughly markled that anything that was Harry, except the husk, is no longer there.
But do you think that Palace will step in and take over the control?
They can't. Why do you think this situation has developed? Why do you think? I mean, the message I was getting from last year was that they were tearing their hair out at the palace about the objectives and the plans, and they were doing their utmost to try to rein them in, and she will not be reined in. So let's see what the outcome is. I become increasingly concerned about the whole thing. Okay, so Leo, come on, let's get off this heavy-duty stuff onto something more entertaining, because especially as how nobody has all day, including our viewers.
Yes.
So we want to, let's wrap it up with something really punchy.
So last time we mentioned Mrs. Thatcher, then there was question, how did you come to know Mrs. Thatcher and what you can tell about her?
Well, I met Mrs. Thatcher quite a few times.
Yes.
The first time I met her was in 1979 at a ball at the Hurlingham Club. Mm-hmm. Donald Stewart, who was the agent for the cities of London and Westminster, and he's an old friend of mine, he came up to me and he said, Georgie, I want you to meet Mrs. Thatcher. So I said, oh, Donald, I'm not interested in meeting Mrs. Thatcher. He said, no, you really must meet her. So I said, oh, Donald, you know, I'm not interested in meeting people I don't know, which is actually true. I'm only interested in, if I meet somebody naturally, it's fine.
Yes.
But to go out of my way to meet anybody, the cows could come home before I care. Anyway, he said, he grabbed me by my wrist. He said, Georgie, come on, I don't want to yank you up, but you're going to meet Mrs. Thatcher. She's one of history's great figures, and you will discover it in time to come. And you've got to meet her. So he dragged me out of my chair and took me to meet her. And there's a series of pictures of me meeting Mrs. Thatcher, which absolutely completely give away what I was thinking, and I remember exactly what I had on. I had on a tucked black strapless long dress with sapphires and diamonds, necklace, earrings, ring, bracelet, the whole 9 yards. And Donald introduced me to her. and she didn't look at me. She looked, as you know, Mrs. Thatcher had absolutely no social skills, I've got to tell you. None at all. And she looked me up and down as Donald was telling her my name, and you could see her thinking, grand aristocrat in the bag, don't need to waste my time on her. I'll move on to somebody else who isn't in the bag. I was absolutely furious. And the cameras were clicking as all of this was going on, and the sequence showed my thoughts, and I mean, you could actually see me practically thinking, you cow. And that was the very first time I met her. And as you can see, she went down like a lead balloon.
Yes.
Then, again, I met her at a ball another time. This would have been a few years later, but I'd met her in between, but glancingly and cursorily. And there was absolutely no interchange whatsoever. And then I met her at a ball at the Grosvenor House with my stepmother-in-law, Margaret, Duchess of Argyll, who will not be known to many of the younger viewers, but to the older ones. Margaret was a great figure, very celebrated on both sides of the Atlantic. And Margaret loved Mrs. Thatcher, and Mrs. Thatcher loved Margaret. And Margaret, who stuttered slightly, said, "Oh, Mrs. Thatcher, I'd like you to meet my daughter-in-law." So I was about to say that, oh, I've met her before, when Mrs. Thatcher, as if it was a revelation, she couldn't have been more charming because I was Margaret's daughter. So I thought, wow, well, I sort of saw for 2 seconds when she turned on the charm what she was like. Yes. But she was, and then of course I knew, and I'm friendly with some of the people who were in her government.
Yes.
And she was a tough task mistress. But you know, and I think my personal feelings towards Mrs. Thatcher all actually affected my judgment in terms of what she did politically. Because there is little doubt that Mrs. Thatcher had it from both sides. The aristocratic Tories who were really rather left-wing, and also snobbish, didn't like her because not only was she not left-wing, she was resolutely for the little man. But not in a, oh, I'm the great Lady Thatcher and I'm going to play Lady Bountiful. Her take was, no, I want you to become rich. I want you to work. I want to give you the means to be prosperous. And she did, because the regeneration in this country has now, to a large measure, been due to Mrs. Thatcher's policies. But she had it not only from the Labour Party and the socialists, and she was quite determined to dismantle socialism, and she succeeded, which is why the average person in this country now has cars, houses, televisions, all the things that when Mrs. Thatcher came into power, even upper class people often didn't have. You know, the country was really poor compared to what it is now, and people were infinitely poorer. But I think because I was so surrounded by people who didn't like Mrs. Thatcher because she was so charmless and she was so, you know, that I think it took me a while to see her virtues. And I do actually think that we have an awful lot to thank Mrs. Thatcher for. But Mrs. Thatcher was a real revolutionary. She was for the little man. She wasn't for the grand aristocrat. She wasn't for the middle class in terms of privileges or comfort. She wasn't for the middle classes, especially the prosperous middle classes. She was for the working classes who she wanted to become prosperous and would convert into middle class. And she did. And so she, to a large extent, succeeded. But I can tell you, she got it from both. The patricians in her own party and the Labour Party. She got it from all sides. She was an extraordinary woman. I have a great deal of respect for Mrs. Thatcher.
Nice. Great experience. Historical experience.
Yeah, but having said that, she had absolutely no charm. Absolutely. I remember sitting beside Dr. Charles Goodison Weeks, I think was his name, at a charity ball. And Mrs. Thatcher was there giving a rousing speech. And he told, oh, I can't stand that woman. She's so grates on one's nerves. And I had to say to him, I'm sorry you're preaching to the converted. I do wish she'd just zip it up, you know. And Mrs. Thatcher became her own worst enemy. Her overbearing personality, her complete lack of charm, her hectoring, her preaching to people who were already converted. I tell you, in some ways, as I'm speaking, I realise Mrs. Thatcher and Meghan Markle have a lot in common. They are their own worst enemies, except that Meghan thinks she's charming, while Mrs. Thatcher knew she wasn't and didn't bother to be charming. But Meghan thinks she's charming. But I mean, you know, her charm is something that people have seen through, and it doesn't wield the magic it did in the early days when people like me fell for it. A significant proportion of the population no longer falls for it. And she's working herself into the position that Mrs. Thatcher worked herself into, which is, well, both of them would have been better off had they learned to shut their mouths.
Well, okay, thank you very much for today and everything. Keep writing your questions and then we'll see you very soon again.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm sorry that we had to revisit things that we visited on the last video, but it's so topical and so much has been going on behind the scenes. And it's becoming such a big issue, not only in terms of Harry and Meghan, but in terms of the governments that they are involving themselves with and tampering with. So thank you so much, and I look forward to our next visit, which will hopefully have little or nothing to do with any of what has been discussed today.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you and goodbye.